I'm Connor Old, and welcome to another episode of Masters of Controlled Chaos. And today we're going to be looking at a very unique director in the sense that he's not a Wes Anderson, he's not a Quentin Tarantino, but he has his own style, a style that's a little more subdued, but style still worth mentioning. I'm a fan of his movies, and he's a particular fan of the crime genre. He is the director of Heat, of Last of the Mohicans, and of Thief. He is none other than Michael Mann. Welcome back, guys. If you're new to the series, what we do every single week is we break down a new filmmaker and talk about the central idea of what makes them great. We also look at what I consider his best movie, what my favorite movie of theirs is, as well as what I think is an underrated one. All three movies that I generally recommend you to watch. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. If you're notice, if you're a longtime fan, the setup sort of changed. I'm still sort of experimenting, just trying to see what setup is the best. I was getting some bad lighting in the last one, I thought, so I decided to maybe mix things up, change it up, and I think I like the way it's looking right now, but I'd love to hear feedback. Maybe you'd like me to go back to the old way. We'll see, but I know the content is still the same, just different shot. I know my people be a little worried about that, but anyways, let's jump right into it. Today we were looking at Michael Mann. I decided to do this one just because he's got a really condensed sort of filmography, and a filmography that I think is, for the most part, really solid, especially this definite streak that he went on, starting with Manhunter, and then that moved into The Last of the Mohicans, and then that moved into Heat, and then that moved into The Insider, and then Ali, and then Collateral. This sort of 6-film streak that I consider most of them at least good. I mean, if you take Ali out of that equation, I consider all those movies great, and that they all have to do with the crime genre. And you could say even past that, people like Miami Vice and Black Hat, and I know some people like Public Enemies. Those are where I think he's starting to teeter off. And that's exactly why I wanted to do this episode, because I'm not sure if Michael Mann can go back to the Michael Mann we wanted him to. We took a break off, and he went 2009 from Public Enemies, and they took a nice break off until 2015 to make Black Hat, and Black Hat was not a success. It was a bad movie. So I didn't think Public Enemies was a bad movie, but Black Hat is definitely a bad movie. So for him to sort of do that and take a break, people thought, oh, this is where he's coming back. He's made a couple of miscalculations maybe, and now he's going to come back, and he just hit the ground even harder. I think he could come back. I really want him to come back because he's making such amazing films. I don't wish bad on him or anything, but I think his career sort of dying down. He's reached his peak, and now he's sort of just in that sort of zone where he's done. He's looking back. He's an old man. He's almost like 76 now. So that's why I sort of decided to look at him. So now let's go into some of the trademarks that Michael Mann does. Of course, he's really well in the crime genre. He loves crime, whether that be LA Takedown, his TV movie, or Thief, or Collateral, or Heat. There's a lot of Public Enemies. There are a lot of crime movies and cops and robbers, and that's where he definitely excels. He has a great style for it because he's actually a early adopter of the digital filming. I think he did it even in maybe not Ali, but his movies after that, like Collateral and Miami Vice. And he's not someone that likes to preserve film. He definitely jumped on the digital bandwagon and loves to use sort of like shaky hand cameras and definitely modern sort of film techniques, especially in his 2000s movies. And he was definitely an early adopter of that, and that sort of became a signature style. He always loved shooting at night because digital really works well at night, and using the city almost as a character. He has said to have sort of an LA trilogy, that being Thief, then Heat, then Collateral, where he shoots LA really beautifully, especially at night, and that contrast with night and the nightlife also goes towards his mysterious characters. He has a lot of dark characters, and that's where a lot of people's criticism of Michael Mann comes from. A lot of people criticize Christopher Nolan this as well, of creating these great stories and these interesting plots, but their characters is where they lack, and they're supposed to be just dark and mysterious, and they don't really delve deep into that. And I think Michael Mann actually knows that. I agree in that sense, where he has sort of a typical character, and I think some people are considering even Black Hat like a cookie-cutter copy-paste of his other movies, but his other movies are great. But he definitely has that style of the gritty sort of dark look, especially at night, using the city as a character with these contrasts with these dark, mysterious characters in the crime genre, right? Where it's trying to humanize these criminals, but it's very dramatic. There's not really a lot of comedy. Sometimes he does play with comedy and does not work. He's very much a serious director, and but I think he does a great job at realizing his mistakes and sort of adding upon that. What I mean by this is that he knows he writes sort of not necessarily one-note characters, but like stereotypical sort of funnel toward characters like this is a Michael Mann character, right? And he relies on his actors to do a great job. But I wouldn't say relies, the great word for that. I actually think he coaches his actors. I think he's very underrated in that sense. A lot of people think of him as a technical director. He has beautiful cinematography, great scores, great action. He can choreograph things very well, and he can move the story on beat by beat very well. He's really well in terms of the structure, but where he lacks is some of the dialogue and some of the character depth. But what I think he does is he coaches his actors into giving great performances. He may not have the best characters written, like in terms of how they're portrayed on paper, but when they're portrayed on screen and he works with the right actors to give the right performances, man, they just elevate the movie so much more. I take a look at something like Public Enemies. Johnny Depp was, I thought, phenomenal in that movie, in a mediocre movie. Even Christian Bale couldn't hold his own to him, and Johnny Depp really sort of delved into that character and really understand the mentality of John Dillinger, the character's name, and then based off a real life person, so you can really dig into that character. Even look at something like Ali, and not a great movie, sort of melodramatic, but who was a standout? Will Smith. As Ali, he really got into that character. And I think that's not a coincidence. You also have De Niro and Pacino, of course, in Heat, James Caan in Thief, Tom Cruise in Collateral, a villain role that we never see from Tom Cruise. And really, I think that gives credit to Michael Mann, where he's really able to coach his actors into giving the right performances he wants. And, then you look at Russell Crowe and Al Pacino in The Insider. Russell Crowe, someone who's known for doing these big bombastic performances, sort of like Gladiator screaming at the top of his lungs, but The Insider is a very much subdued role, definitely out of his wheelhouse, and he nails it. And I think Michael Mann is a great, underrated sort of actor's director in that sense, where he's able to give them great performances and that complement his work style. So he's definitely aware of his weaknesses, but then complements that with some of his strengths in an incredible way. And I think that's one of the reasons why he is a master of controlled chaos, is because he could get all these moving parts that are all over the place and really condense them and sort of have a unified vision. And you see that with a lot of his movies. It is sort of that style, but it's a realistic style in the sense that it feels like in a real world, but you feel that it's almost Taxi Driver-esque, especially the LA trilogy that I mentioned, the unofficial LA trilogy, by the way. But something that's really interesting in that point. Also, I want to point out that in the crime genre, he's really been able to tackle that, but that doesn't mean he's only exclusive to that. Look at The Insider, an incredible sort of character piece with no action really, that's just about sort of characters and dialogue and trying to move the story forward and ethics and morality. And I think that's where he actually excels. People consider him into the crime genre, but the crime genre is just a really great outlet for morality. See, you have The Insider, which is all about morality, even Last of the Mohicans, where you have like, there's the Indians or the Native Americans, and then the colonials, and they sort of fight back and forth. And Daniel Day-Lewis is a white man with the Indians, but he sort of almost sees both sides, and he's just trying to say that we're here to help. We're not trying to hurt you guys, where we don't want to start war. But then there's other tribes that are trying to start war. There's different morals, different philosophies, and how sort of things get muddled. And sometimes it just takes a Daniel Day-Lewis to talk to each other and be like, hey, this is what we talk about. And I thought Michael Mann did a great job in terms of mixing up the languages and that sense of the different tribes, and some speak English and some don't, right? Very interesting in terms of morality. We obviously see that in The Insider with the tobacco. Just, should I tell, should I not tell? It'll risk my family, but it's the truth that it needs to be out for everyone else. And I just think the crime genre is that outlet for morality with the cops and the criminals that are very similar in their sort of behavior, but they took different paths at one point, and trying to make the criminals sort of relatable in that John Dillinger and, De Niro's character, and he sort of just creating these characters that they're real human beings, but they're criminals, but that's their job in a sense, and just creating that morality, and then he allows you to sort of make your own decision. And he steps back and says, this is what I believe, not necessarily, but he says like, this is what the film may be portraying you, but then there's also this other avenue. You sort of decide where you stand on the morality based on the different characters. And I think actually he's known for his longer run times, 2.5 hours plus, almost up to Heat, which is 2 hours and 50 minutes. But he also just creates this thing where he sort of allows you to sort of digest and become and relate to these characters a lot more, so that you could realize like, oh, maybe this guy's not a good guy, maybe he is. I'm definitely inspired by Michael Mann and someone like Martin Scorsese, where they're both really great at that in terms of the crime genre, not really using it as just a big action bombastic thing, but really looking depth into the characters and making them real human people. I thought Michael Mann does an amazing job in that. Okay, now let's move on to what I consider his best movie, which also happens to be my favorite movie of his, Heat. What I love about Heat and why I consider it my favorite and his best is just the incredible performances, I think, from De Niro and Pacino. A lot of people think of this as maybe just a really great action movie, or maybe there's like, oh yeah, this is the time Pacino and De Niro came together on screen. I know that's what a lot of people talked about. I wasn't alive back then, but I know that's based on my research and my history. You know, they were together in Godfather Part 2, but now they're here finally on screen, right? These two big acting powerhouses. And I think Michael Mann does a great job. You know, they could have been thrown in some random movie, because I think they've been in one more movie together aside from Heat, and it was just like a total bomb. No one remembers it. I can't even remember the name. But I think Michael Mann deserves a lot of credit in creating this great movie for these two actors to really blossom in. Just the performances of two of them, but also the writing in terms of how the movie plays out. The movie is 2 hours and 15 minutes, and it moves really well. It's paced expertly. On a technical level, it's pretty well magnificent, from sound to score to how the movie's just structured and paced and edited. And even at 2 hours and 15 minutes, it's great because you can see the progression of them. And for me, this is really a two-person movie, and that's why it's almost like double any Michael Mann movie. You know, look at something like Public Enemy. I thought Johnny Depp, John Dillinger's arc was really well done, but Christian Bale sort of left on the side, then changed with Stephen Lang, and they didn't really explore that as much as I wanted to. But then you look at Heat, they take the time, and they almost take two 1 hour and a half movies, put them together to create this interesting sort of back and forth. You look at the two different men in De Niro and Pacino. If you don't know the plot of the movie, it is De Niro is the criminal and Pacino is the cop. So you have these two men that are similar, and there's definitely a duality between them, but in society sort of sense of the opposites, right? The cop and the criminal, you know, the good and the bad. But really when we look into them, we can see more about them. And that's what I really love about really Heat. Is just there's great action movies, some of the best in terms of action set pieces, but for a lot of the movie, it's just the aftermath of the heist, the relationships that both characters have, how they sort of look at the sort of the morals that they have, and also sort of what makes them who they are, and especially the topic of just their jobs. You know, they have nothing better to do in the great diner scene. That's what they talk about, where they respect each other and they respect how they're sort of the same person. They're definitely on the same intellectual wavelength. And just be able to create like two different viewpoints on things. And that's why I think this is sort of a movie of two different viewpoints of two protagonists. Instead of having one great protagonist, you have two great protagonists. And then you have two climaxes, one being the diner scene where they first meet and they talk about it for a little while, and the last being the second being the climax, the next climax, which is the heist. So you have that sort of, there's two movies in here, and they really work well together. You have the two characters, but you also have the two movies of like a typical action movie with all the action and whatnot, but then another drama, something like The Insider, where you have these two characters that have separate lives, and we see them, and it's sort of like a hairpin, which is like a circle like that, where they come together and then they meet, and then they sort of cross and go their own separate ways. And you have the diner scene, which is definitely the dialogue heavy sort of, you know, in something in like Thief, there's a great diner scene there between James Caan and his love interest just talking to him about him. And same way in Heat, I think this is redone really well in the sort of diner sequence where the two are talking to each other. And so you have that dialogue sort of character piece climax, but then you also have the action climax. So it's like, there's an action movie, there's a drama movie, there's the two protagonists, there's, you know, it's two different moralities, two sense of beliefs, and just two different ways of dealing with things. And I think that's why a lot of people really gravitate towards Heat, because I'd show it to my dad, for example, who really likes action movies, but then my mom probably also would like it too, because it's sort of like a romantic, in terms of both of them have romantic leads, and there's sort of a relationship struggle there, and the conflict with their jobs. And I feel like this is maybe a little too heady for Heat, because it's just like a heist movie, but it really is fantastic at that. But the heist stuff will not let you down. One of the best cinematic moments, I think, in history is the heist scene where you have Val Kilmer and De Niro robbing the bank, and then Pacino's right there on their tail. They finally meet after sort of a little bit of a cat and mouse game. They finally meet in the action sense, where it's just so intense. They have these assault rifles and the hockey masks in the streets of LA. You feel like you're in there. The sound design is incredible. You're like, trying to move all around. You feel the bullets passing by you. People are dying. The stakes are real, and the build-up for that is so well done because you see these two characters and you care about these characters, and they're not definitely seen as, oh, these are the bad guys. You know, you could have made this a movie about Pacino and then just have some insert random bad guy there and spend 20 minutes of him on a 3-hour movie and really make it about Pacino's character, and it'd be a great movie, I think, but you wouldn't have the stakes of caring about them in the sort of the heist scenario there. And even Val Kilmer's character, you care about him because he is a friend of Pacino. So you have everyone in these two different storylines. So you have two protagonists that you care about, and something like Hell or High Water does a great job at this, of the two different groups in that movie where they show, oh, I don't know who to cheer for. Really, it's a hard movie to say, like, I want to cheer for the cops, I want to cheer for the criminals, but I like both characters. It's really interesting, and Michael Mann threads that line, and I think is a lot harder than some people do, because it's very easy to make a bad guy bad and just people turn off their brains and hate about them. You know, I talked about last week with Luc Besson about how I didn't like Nikita because the opening was so bad, in my opinion, where she did something so irreversible I couldn't cheer for her for the rest of the movie, and because she's the only protagonist, it hurt my feelings for that character. And maybe they're trying to redeem that character, that's what the movie is about, but he made the critical mistake that I think he doesn't make in Leon. But you can go check that video for more of an in-depth analysis of there. What I really love about that is just the actual restraint that Michael Mann is able to keep in having the two biggest actors in the world, greatest actors of all time, you could say, in the same movie, and not make it a buddy cop sort of movie where they're there all the time and they're sort of together, but make them on two separate opposites, so that when they come together, it's an amazing occurrence. And the diner scene really is incredible. Where they're talking back and forth, it's a battle of wits and words and not of action and fighting, and just the jabs back and forth sort of intellectually. Might sound a little highbrow in that sense, but it really is incredible the way they just sort of try to unravel each other, but you can't let him get too much into your personal life, but you also want to make him see. It's very much like a chess match in that sense, or even like a boxing match where a lot of it is the mental part of it, and you just take the physical aspect out of it. And they actually didn't rehearse that scene to make it seem more authentic, where everything's sort of a little bit awkward in terms of, you know, they're meeting for the first time. They don't know their ways of naturally talking, but they just want to point out little things. You know, if you have a really intelligent conversation with, you know, say a conservative and a liberal, sort of two people on different aspects of the scale that believe different views or whatever, if they're both like intelligent and, you know, not going to scream at each other, they'll have sort of like, you'll make this point, yeah, but what about this? And then they'll return with, yeah, but what about this? And sort of that back and forth of, you know, we agree that there's an issue here, but we have two different viewpoints of going about it. And you know, Pacino's trying to clean up the streets and being a cop, and De Niro's trying to sort of get rid of them in a sense by being a criminal sort of sense and break down establishment and society so it can be rebuilt again. Different viewpoints, and I think Mann does a great job of really explaining that really well. And really, this holds up really well. If you're scared, like, this is a 1995 movie, but it feels so modern. I mean, it could have been released this year and it would be my favorite movie of the year probably, but just an incredible movie that feels modern, and that his use of like sort of the digital sort of filmmaking style that he's used. I don't think this was shot on digital film, but it has that feel in terms of the shaky cams and its close up and how everything's dark, and it's similar to his Collateral. And by the way, this is really hard for me to pick. I love Collateral, I love The Insider, I love Thief, and actually speaking of Thief, that is my underrated pick. Let's hop over into there. Why I think this is underrated, just because a lot of people don't really watch it, they don't go that far back into his catalog, and if you're a Michael Mann fan, this is where it starts. You know, his style is definitely developed here with the complex characters, with the dark, gritty nightlife style, with the authenticity, and it's a really credible performance by James Caan, maybe his best, which is saying a lot, but he was really awesome in this, and that's why I really think it's an underrated one. One that I really liked and was almost my favorite is because of the complex character in James Caan, where he has a set of morals, but he can't almost explain to someone, and you can sort of get the read on it, but you don't understand it fully, but you do understand that he has these morals and he's going to stick by these morals, and his morals are consistent, but it's almost so hard to explain to him, because sometimes he says yes to someone, but sometimes he says no to someone, and you're like, wait, that doesn't line up. But then when he sort of explains it to you, you're sort of like, okay, now I sort of get it. And just, he's a complex character. He's not a one line like, you know, Leon last week in Luc Besson, he says, no woman, no children. You know, James Caan is a thief, right? So he robs banks in terms of, he gets actually the big, he's the guy who unlocks the safes. He's not like a bank robber that goes in and just takes the money. He does the safe and really does a meticulous little thing, and authenticity in terms of he actually did open a safe when he was shooting it on the first time and did all the little buttons and all the cranking and stuff like that. A lot of work goes into that, so he definitely prepared in that. And then also they have another great restaurant sort of diner scene where James Caan professes his love and his past to his woman and really just wants to be with them, and has a great romantic story and that struggle of romanticism because this character is so like dark and mysterious, but also his job, and he doesn't really want to do his job anymore, but it's his job and he needs the money, and you know, he doesn't want to get screwed over by people. He's definitely sort of subdued and he doesn't trust anyone, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. I know I definitely did. And you definitely feel like he has a past to him, like he has history. You know, we see him in the jail with Willie Nelson, talking about him just like, oh, you know, this was sort of his old days. I could definitely see a prequel to Thief if they ever did that, which they won't ever because it's too late now. But if they did, I would definitely watch it because there's definitely a history to this character because he's at the end of his life in terms of, or his career, that being said. And really, I loved it because it was almost a mix of the old and the new. It's almost, oh, sorry about that. It reminded me of something like The French Connection, but also reminded me of something like modern day movies, like a Heat or whatever. So it's a great mix of that too. A little bit of the old, a little bit of the new. Really interesting. You should check it out if you haven't. Thief. So anyways, guys, for all those reasons, that's why Michael Mann is a master of controlled chaos. Make sure you like the video, comment below, let me know what your favorite Michael Mann movie is. If you haven't seen them, which movies have I left out? I know a lot of people like Last of the Mohicans, for example. Stuff like that, point that out to me. Anyways, guys, I'm Connor Old. Until next time, stay tuned.